Welcome to the WWH show. This is a show that asks a series of why, what, and how questions on topics that have national, regional, and global significance and implications. Today, we have such a topic to talk about. Why stress is a killer of performance. Stress has been affecting many people around the world. Today, I have a privilege to talk to Vernon Williams. He has been an expert on stress, and also he has masters in applied behavioral science, has been a coach for 10 years, and he has written 5 books, and also have been giving keynotes and trainings on this same topic. Vernon, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that we are talking about how to manage stress. The first question is, why stress is affecting so many people? Why people are stressed? Look around, there are people, friends, colleagues, and also ourselves. We are stressed. Life stresses us out. So what are the most important reasons why people stress out?
Well, I think certainly one of the biggest reasons is because there's a misconception about stress and what causes it. Most of the time, people assume that stress is caused by external factors or external circumstances, when in fact that is not the case. For example, today, as you know, I had a little bit of a challenge with the directions on getting here at the time that we agreed to because of the directions. Well, it would be easy to say that caused me stress. Well, it did not. And the reason it did not is because of the fact that I recognize that I am in charge of whether or not I have stress. No external factor can cause me to have stress. So that's a common misconception that people have, and they attribute the fact that they're stressed, if you will, to factors such as my job, my boss, my relationships, or the lack of money, or all of these factors, and that is not the case. And of course, as long as you don't properly diagnose the cause, you can't begin to take the appropriate measures to remedy the situation.
So the main reason why we are stressed out is because of ourselves. That means we are the worst enemy for ourselves.
That is exactly.
In terms of stressing ourselves.
That is exactly right. We absolutely do stress ourselves. Circumstances do not. I read a great quote not long ago. It said, "Stress is not what happens to us. It's how we respond to what happens to us. And our response is something that we have total control over."
So for the same situation, someone may be stressed, someone may not be stressed.
Absolutely.
Based on their perception about stress, what causes stress?
That's exactly correct. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a coach and a speaker and a trainer, and you do that all the time. Does that cause you stress?
No, I enjoy it.
Absolutely. And then you could find someone else if you say you have to give a talk before a group of 200 people or your work team or whatever the case may be, and they say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out because I've got to give this talk in front of X number of people." So again, it's not the speaking in public that causes stress, it's what we think about that. And that is something that we have control over.
That's very interesting. Once we know this, concept about we are the one to allow whether to be stressed or not, it's over. Because we are the one to allow to give that stress a key to stress us out.
That is exactly correct. That is exactly correct. And once we realize that, that is what we call a game changer. Because we go through our entire lives saying, my husband stresses me out, my wife stresses me out, my boss stresses me out, my neighbors stress me out. And none of that is true because of what we just talked about. You could have if stress were caused by those external factors, then every single person who experienced the exact same thing would have the exact same reaction.
So this is about the mindset. Like if we believe that whatever happens outside of ourselves, we can really react to that situation in a positive tone rather than, accepting that, hey, this external factor has control over me to be stressed. So we can say, okay, this is happening, but I don't want to allow that to stress me. Hey, this is happening, but it's not good, but I don't want to allow that to affect me within. So that anything outside of ourselves should not be allowed to stress us out.
If we're stressed, you're absolutely right. If we are feeling stress, it's because we've made a choice to feel that. Again, as I was driving here and looking for the address, and at one point was actually going in the wrong direction based on the GPS information that I'd received. And I had an opportunity to be stressed because time was, of course, of the essence. But I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to be stressed.
Control. Yeah, you just let it go.
I am where I am, and I'm going to drive carefully. I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to get there safely. And I said to myself, what is going to happen? What is the worst thing that can happen here? And of course, maybe, okay, so I'll be 2 minutes late. Okay, no problem. I can live with that. So, but again, the key is recognizing that we have that control, and it's what we think and believe that causes the stress, as opposed to the external circumstances.
By the way, that's very important because, since I learned how to manage stress, when people see me not angry when they hurt me, or when they do something wrong against me, they think I'm faking it out.
Yes,
because I don't show any stress, or I don't show any anger, so they think that I'm faking it out. But I'm not faking it, because this thing happened. They hurted me, or maybe they affected what I do, whatever. I take that into perspective and I say that, okay, this happened. Okay, this and this affected, but I don't want to give that a big room in my heart, in my mind. So I don't want to think about it. I don't want to stress myself and affect my contentment, my happiness, and my joy.
There you go. That's the key, the joy. We make a conscious decision. And in fact, one of the books that I wrote is called The Power to Rejoice, 21 Days to Victory Over Your Problems. And so no matter what problem you're faced with, you can have joy in spite of that. And the way to do that is what we're just talking about here. Instead of allowing that circumstance to dictate your response, instead saying positive things to yourself.
That's very powerful. We're talking this because, many of our audience are people who are professionals, leaders, change agents, and so on. If they allow stress to affect them in their home, in their workplace, in their neighborhood, in their community, that affects their performance.
Oh, absolutely.
So they have to know. So this is one of the skills they should have as leaders on how to manage stress, because these are busy people, busy professionals, leaders, change agents, and if they allow stress to affect their performance, it really kills their progress, and it also affects how they bring change in their life, in their community, and so on. That's why we're talking about it. It's very, very important. We should not undermine the power of stress in affecting our performance.
It absolutely affects performance in a number of ways. One, it robs us of our energy, of our creativity. It affects our ability to focus. All of these things that come as a result of just having stress, because our body is responding to what our mind is telling us. And so, and that has a very powerful impact on our performance.
Exactly. But the good thing that you said that we're not helpless about stress. We are the author of our life, so
That's
we can
correct.
really manage stress. But I don't want people to think that all kinds of stress are bad. So let's talk about a little bit, is stress bad all the time? That means, are there stresses that may be good to us, to our performance?
Well, you raise a very good question, and that's another misconception that I think people have, and that is that some stress is good. And in order to answer your question, I want to make a distinction between stress and what I call stimulation. Stimulation is something that we experience if we're faced with a deadline, or maybe we have a goal to achieve, and that stimulation can cause us to actually perform better. Whereas stress, on the other hand, actually robs us of our ability to perform. And I know people have often said to me, and I get this all the time, stress, some stress is good. If I didn't have stress, I wouldn't be motivated. Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you ever drive by a school or a playground and you see kids out there playing, Now, kids don't have stress, but they aren't having any trouble getting motivated to play on the swing or the merry-go-round or whatever the case may be. So I think that's one of the other misconceptions, that I need stress in order to be motivated to accomplish things. And I think that does a disservice when we believe that. And so I, again, make the distinction between stress, which affects us physically, emotionally, relationally, and so forth, and also robs us of the ability to perform at our peak level. I make a distinction between that. That is never good. Being able to, or being subject to those kinds of influences and those kinds of results, I don't think is ever a good thing. Whereas stimulation, I think, can inspire us to perform at a peak level.
So it's very powerful, because now if we don't have this stimulation word in our dictionary, we should have that one in our dictionary, because rather than using stress for that kind of stimulations, we should use the right term, which is stimulation.
Yeah.
Now, if I am a parent or a boss or a business owner, now I have to make a decision. Rather than stressing out my people, the people that I influence,
right,
my children, the people who are under my influence, now I have to find ways to stimulate them.
Right.
I can find, without stressing them out, I can find some recognitions, rewards, some incentives, so that rather than stressing them, because stressing, in the long term, it has many counterproductive effects. Even if they may deliver right away, in the long term, it affects their health and so on and so forth. So why don't I just change? The result is the same. I want them to perform, or I want them to behave, or I want them to deliver. But I can use stimulations in a very nice and indirect ways to stimulate them, to encourage them to deliver.
Sure, absolutely. Another one of the books I wrote is called Why Employees Fail to Meet Performance Expectations and How to Fix the Problem. And in the book, I've identified the 20 reasons that employees do not perform up to expectations. And I give the solution to that, and I give step-by-step instructions on how to implement that. And some of the reasons employees do not perform up to expectations are they don't know their job. They don't know what they're supposed to do. There are no performance standards. They don't know how well they're supposed to do it. As you said earlier, they don't receive recognition for it. Recognition is a powerful thing. They don't have any involvement in the design of the work that they're doing. And one of the things that we've found to be absolutely true is that when people have involvement in the design of their work, they have much more of a vested interest in carrying it out in accordance to the specifications that they've participated. So getting employees involved. So these are all very positive ways to stimulate people and not create stress in the workplace.
Exactly. One point you mentioned about how to engage employees without stressing them out is to find out ways to engage them and also reward them. I have seen many people motivated by some of the rewards they get from their organizations. But the problem with some organizations is that they may not know what kind of rewards they should give. For example, for a person who doesn't have a car, if you give that person a parking spot, as an incentive, it doesn't encourage him. He doesn't have a car. Or if you give a rural farmer, let's say, an iPad, there's no internet connection, there is no skill to use that. This is not really an incentive. You have to find a way to find out what motivates someone.
That is correct.
You have to tailor, customize that incentive, that reward to motivate that person. Is that person interested in getting, let's say, some benefits, or maybe some day offs, or some opportunities, let's say, to go to school, or participate in a training, and so on and so forth.
Sure. And another thing I point out in the book is knowing the people that you're trying to inspire or motivate, and what is it that would cause them to be engaged and accomplish the things that you're seeking to have them accomplish. And that takes time and effort to do that. And of course, one of the other misconceptions that leaders have oftentimes about inspiring people is that it's going to take money. And oftentimes it doesn't take money. Just saying, well done, a good job, a pat on the back, a high five, nice job, recognition in front of their peers.
Yeah, sending email and recognizing that person.
Sure,
to the
stopping
whole
by
group.
the person's desk and saying, I just want to compliment you on the fine job you did on that project, having the leader do that. They don't cost anything, you know, and it's very powerful.
Yeah, and also in relationships, it's also very powerful to recognize. People think, of course, you have to recognize the strengths of your partner, your friend, your spouse, and so on, and find ways to really encourage them, stimulate them to engage with you. You can find some expensive, some of them not expensive, gifters, and stimulate them to really work with you, partner with you, so that the relationship flourish rather than stressing people out in your relationship.
Sure. And it just starts with basic caring. I care, and therefore I'm going to take the time to get to know what types of things would be meaningful to this person.
Exactly. When people see exactly you respect them, you appreciate them.
You value them.
Yeah, you value them, and you have the best interest of the people in your heart. They really know that you mean it. And then when you give some, incentives, stimulations, they really receive it well. But if you don't respect them, value them, and if you give them whatever gift or whatever, rewards, it may not motivate them and stimulate them.
Right. That is exactly right. And one of the reasons that I hear leaders say I don't give recognition is because we don't have any money in the budget. And as I said earlier, oftentimes the most meaningful things don't have to cost anything.
And also they think that, they're just doing their jobs.
Yeah.
And they're going to get their paycheck. So
That's-
why should I really go
right.
the extra mile to reward them, appreciate them and so on? That's
Sure.
also wrong because, yes, if you appreciate them, if you honor them, if you value them, if you reward them, these people are motivated to deliver beyond your expectations.
Absolutely. And that comes back to the whole issue of stress in the beginning. As we were saying earlier, our beliefs are what determine whether or not we're stressed. Our beliefs also determine whether or not we're going to recognize our employees. When we talk about beliefs, all of us have beliefs that many times we aren't even aware of. We have beliefs that fall into three categories, I believe. The first set of beliefs that we have are beliefs about ourselves. I'm competent, I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm effective, or whatever. We have beliefs about ourselves. The other category in which we have beliefs are about other people. People are lazy. People only work for the money, or whatever. That's another category of our beliefs. And then our third category of beliefs that we have to do with life. Life ought to be easy. There shouldn't be any hassles in life. And so anytime we have something occur, the first thing that happens is our beliefs about that particular thing comes into play. And that's what determines whether or not we have stress. That determines whether or not we give recognition or whatever. It always comes back to our beliefs.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so it's very important, and one of the things I spend a lot of time doing in workshops and coaching and so forth is helping people understand their beliefs, because our beliefs actually create the reality that we experience. And we treat our beliefs as though they were facts, when in fact they're simply things that we believe. And so in order for us to be effective as leaders or whatever the case may be, I think it's very important for us to understand what it is that we believe.
By the way, it's beyond our scope, but it's very interesting that people should know that when you know your beliefs, when you are conscious about them,
Yes.
you become the master of your life. Because
Absolutely.
obviously your brain responds to your belief system.
Sure.
Let's say that a thought comes into your mind. If it is against your belief system, the brain doesn't entertain it.
That's
If it is something that you believe, it entertains it. So if you want to change, for example, your outside world, your emotions, you have to first change your belief system. Because changing the belief system changes your thoughts, your mindsets, and that changes your emotion outside. Your emotion determines the kind of life you're going to have.
That's exactly right. It flows like this. We have beliefs, and that leads to emotions, and that leads to actions, and that leads to results. And that's the way it is.
Yeah.
It
So
always follows.
Yeah, you can't just say, hey, I want to change these results.
You can't, no.
Yeah, I want to change these actions. No.
Yeah.
I want to change these emotions.
No.
No. You have to go to the roots.
You have to, that's
yeah,
exactly
that's the
right.
challenge for many people,
it
you know.
is a challenge.
They try to make themselves happy, contented, and that doesn't last long. And they wonder, what is going on? I was happy yesterday, today I'm not.
Yeah.
So the root cause is your belief system.
That's
for example, how do you perceive stress, for example?
That's exactly
You know,
right.
some disappointments. Do you treat them like disappointments, or do you treat them like opportunity to learn and grow? If you have that kind of belief system, when something disappointing happens, you don't react negatively. You don't stress yourself.
That's exactly
You don't make yourself mad and hurt, you know, your health, your relationships, your performances. What do is you just accept that as a reality, and then you embrace it, you learn from it, you grow, and just enjoy that opportunity. If you have that kind of mindset, that kind of belief system, then your emotions and also your actions, your results will be glorious.
That is absolutely right on target. You know, I find it interesting with all of the books that have been written on stress. If you go to Google and put in the word stress, you get all these, you know, millions of responses. If you go to Amazon, there are thousands and thousands of books on stress. There have been so many workshops and so forth on stress. And yet, according to the latest surveys, 80% of the people surveyed say that their stress is as high or higher than it was a year ago. Why is that? And I think the reason is because most of the literature, most of the information that is out there on stress talks about managing stress. And what it really gets into is things like exercising, eating right, getting the proper amount of sleep. And all these are wonderful things. I exercise every day. I eat properly and so forth. Those are very positive things to do. The difficulty is that they deal with the symptoms of the stress and not the cause of the stress. Hence, 80% of the people say that even though I've exercised and I've gotten a short-term benefit of that, if I run a mile or 2 miles or 5 miles, I'm feeling more relaxed now, you know. But then when I go back to whatever the situation was that triggered my stress, notice I say triggered, not cause. When I go back to the situation that triggered my stress, guess what's right back? The stress. And the reason is because we haven't really dealt with the cause, which is the beliefs and the thinking, as we're talking about here. And no matter how much we exercise, we're going to continue to come back to that.
So I challenge our audience that, you know, if you are trying to overcome stress, don't try to manage it. Yes. Managing stress only help you to just overcome it. But if you want to have a stress-free life, you have to go to the root cause. That is changing your belief system.
All thinking flows out of our belief.
And renewing your mindset.
Renewing, absolutely, renewing your mind. Albert Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created the problem. And all too often, that's exactly what we try to do. We try to change the results that we're getting while holding on to the beliefs that led to the result. And that's why diets and many other things that we try to change don't work. We set resolutions. You know, we're just going into a new year, and that's a great time that many people say, oh, this is a new year, I'm going to resolve to stop smoking, or I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to exercise, or whatever. And studies show that by the end of January, only 8% of the people who've made resolutions have kept them. And that's a classic example of trying to change the results while holding on to the same belief that produced those results.
Exactly. Why do you think people have difficulties to change their belief system? Why they focus on the results or focus on the outcomes, the superficial things, rather than going to the root cause, which is scrutinizing your belief system?
Well, I think the simple answer is I don't think people realize the impact of their beliefs. We don't think about our beliefs. We just, you know, we're born as a blank slate. We don't have any beliefs. And then through exposure to our parents, neighbors, teachers, coaches, as whatever, we start to develop these beliefs. And then we don't even think about them. We just feel like that's the way it is, you know, that there are certain things that if you get married, your wife is supposed to do certain things. That's just the way it is. Or your husband is supposed to act a certain way. And that's your belief. You don't even think about it. It's just your belief. And you don't even recognize that it's a belief. You actually treat it as though it's a fact. I mean, it's just the same as if you climb up on the roof of this building and dive off, you're going to go down because of gravity. Well, people take those same approaches to expectations of other people in relationships. You know, one of the things people tell me, my boss should get my opinion before making decisions that impact me, for example. And that's a fact. It's not like that's something they believe. That's something that has to be that way. And if their boss doesn't come to them and get their opinion before enacting some policy that's going to impact them, then they're really stressed out about it. Not because the boss did it, but because what they believed the boss should have done before the boss did it.
Exactly. So one of the reasons maybe people are not going to find out the root causes is because they may not sit down and reflect.
Yeah.
If they sit down and reflect, they could be able to see the root causes of why they are stressed.
Yeah.
That is their belief system.
That's correct.
And if they sit down and think, they could be able to see their belief in a certain way that is affecting them. And if they just change it, fine-tune that belief system, they could be able to alleviate stress and they could be able to live a stress-free life. But the question is, can people sit down, reflect? Because many people consider thinking as a torture.
Yeah.
And when you don't want to think, when you don't want to sit down, it's very hard for you to really find out the root cause.
Well, another thing I have learned is that people change when the pain level reaches a certain point. You know, the only two things that cause people to change. One is avoiding pain, which I'm just mentioning, and the other one is seeking pleasure. And so when we apply those principles, that's what would cause people to change. If there's, like I had a client recently who came to me and sought my coaching because he'd been in the hospital like 3 times. He was on a lot of different medications. The doctors had told him if he didn't calm down, he was going to have a heart attack. He was just absolutely a mess. And we spent a 3-hour session going through a lot of what we're talking about here today. And he learned the principles of what we're talking about here, and he applied that. And today he's off the medication, and he's doing much better and feeling much more joy in his life and enjoying his relationships and so forth, unlike what he had done perhaps ever. But it took the level of pain that he was experiencing in order to cause him to seek out a remedy to that rather than continuing to go in that circle.
Yeah, so let's talk about why stress is a killer of our performance, because many families, organizations, and communities are affected by stressed leaders. Right. Some organizations, they may even give warning to some of their leaders who are stressed because their stress level is affecting their team, their performance, and in turn, their organization. Sure. So they give them deadlines. Go and see so-and-so, a coach, and work on your stress within the coming 3 months. If you don't change, we're going to fire you. Yeah. So stress is a killer of performance. Right. So let's talk about that.
Right. Well, we alluded to this earlier. One of the things that stress does in terms of performance is it affects your focus, what you can concentrate on, just being able to sit still and focus on a project is something that's very necessary. It affects procrastination. People just can't get started to do what they know they need to do. It affects meeting deadlines. It affects our energy level. One of the symptoms of stress, of course, is not being able to sleep. not being able to rest. And of course, if you're not sleeping well or resting at night, then you carry that over the next day, and that affects your performance. I read a statistic that said 75 to 90% of all medical visits are for stress-related complaints.
Wow.
Yes, headaches, backaches, sinus infections. Because one of the things stress does from a physical standpoint is it suppresses your immune system, which makes you susceptible to getting colds and infections and that sort of thing. It affects, and of course that leads to absenteeism. People just aren't at work. It's estimated that stress costs U.S. industry $300 billion with a B, $300 billion each year, and absenteeism and lost productivity. Just because and a lot of times we have what is called presenteeism, where people are present at work, but because they're so zapped out by stress, they aren't productive.
They're not innovative, they're not creative.
They're just there, because their minds are someplace else. If somebody has deep financial problems and that's pressing on their minds and they're being hounded by collection agents and so forth, even though they may be physically at work, their productivity is nowhere near where it could be because they're thinking about that.
So $300 billion is huge per year.
It absolutely is. And this includes healthcare costs. It includes, as I said, absenteeism. It includes lost productivity. It includes presenteeism. It includes turnover, where people just leave jobs or go to another job. So as leaders of industry, that's a big ticket item.
So organizations, families should take this thing seriously, because
absolutely, sure.
If they deal with stress, that means they're going to save some of their money. Their money, and billions of dollars.
Sure. And each time you lose an employee, for example, and you got to bring in a new one, that's lost productivity while you onboard that person and get them up to speed to where they're as productive as the person who left, who was so stressed out or whatever. So it's a very costly endeavor. So it behooves leaders to be mindful and take measures to conquer this stress, both in themselves and in their workplaces.
Because if impacts are not just on the individual.
It does. It impacts the bottom line.
It has a ripple effect on the people around that person, the organization, and so on.
It has a big impact.
Earlier we briefly mentioned about what triggers stress. Let's take a little bit of time and talk about what triggers stress.
I like that trigger, see, because I use the analogy of our car. We have a key that triggers the
ignites.
It doesn't cause the car to start, but it triggers a chain of events that leads to the car starting. So that I like the way you use that trigger. So yes, there are a number of things that trigger stress. Money is always at the top of the list. Loss of job, for example, past taxes or things of that nature.
Loss of loved ones.
That's another thing. Job pressures cause stress or trigger stress. Conflict with a coworker, conflict with a boss, or whatever. Another big thing is balancing work and family. Having a high workload and feeling torn between working extra hours versus spending time with the family, or missing events of the children, or that kind of thing. Balancing that. Relationships between spouses, relationships between parents and children.
Bosses and employees.
Absolutely. Relationships, always a big trigger for stress. Family health. Having a family health member who has a health issue is a trigger for stress. And finally, personal health concerns. And as I mentioned earlier, 75 to 90% of medical visits are stress related. So it's like a vicious cycle. I'm having the stress and I'm having to seek medical attention for that. And that's triggering additional stress because I'm concerned about my health. And the more I'm concerned about my health, the more stressed I become about my health, and that leads to more health problems. And so it's kind of like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So those are some of the triggers.
Yeah, and also violence. It could be domestic violence, maybe violence in battles,
Yes.
especially post-traumatic syndromes and so on because of violence. These kind of things trigger stress.
Yeah. And again, I can't overemphasize the need to say trigger as opposed to cause, because we've already established that we could have two people experience exactly the same event. It could be a war, it could be a health issue, it could be a financial issue, it could be a relationship issue, it could be any of those things. And if stress were the culprit, then every single person who experienced that would have exactly the same reaction. You could predict it. There'd be no variation at all. But the fact that we see, just war, for example, some people go into war and they come back and they're fine. Other people go into war and they come back and they're not fine. And you could have two people in the exact same war zone doing exactly the same thing, but their experiences relative to that could be completely different. Hence, their response to that would be completely different.
Yeah, you're right. So that's why people has to be conscious about this thing, how they respond to the event, to the situation, rather than just accept what it is. I mean, rather than just reacting to our emotions based on certain events and situations, we should be conscious and react positively rather than allowing stress to stress us out. Let's spend a little bit of time also on the symptoms. We briefly mentioned about some of the symptoms. Let's talk about the physical and the emotional symptoms that people may experience when they are stressed.
Okay. Yes. Well, some of the physical symptoms, and this can vary from person to person. Some of the physical symptoms could be insomnia, just not being able to sleep, or when you're sleeping, having all kinds of weird dreams, nightmares, and so forth. Feeling tired constantly. Just you go to bed and you get up and you're feeling just as tired as you were before you went to bed. That's a common symptom. Having back pain, having digestive issues, just upset stomach, diarrhea, or constipation, or any number of things, all having to do with the digestive thing. Having problems during pregnancy. Women who are stressed a lot have problems in that area. Just loss of appetite, another symptom. Or the other extreme, just constantly eating, So those are some of the symptoms that headaches, for example, another example of symptoms.
Yeah, I mean also depression, anxiety, and
Sure.
also immune suppression that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the anxiety, depression, those are some examples of
heart attacks, strokes.
Yeah.
So these are devastating kind of symptoms.
That's why, as I said, 75 to 90% of all visits to seek medical attention are for stress-related type symptoms. And people don't make that connection. They just think, oh my gosh, I keep having these migraine headaches, or my stomach just seems to be off, or whatever. And so you go in for that. But at the root of it, and many times, almost 90% of the time, 75 to 90% of the time, if you trace the origin of that, it would be something related to stress.
I want to share a story with you. Last time I also shared this story to someone because there is a challenge for people to differentiate between working hard and stressed. Because walking that delicate line is very important. We have to work hard. We have to give our best. We have to perform. We have to deliver. But we should not cross that delicate line and stress ourselves. Now, when we are young, healthy, maybe we may not be able to express these symptoms. We are young, maybe healthy, whatever. But if we keep on crossing that delicate line, at the end of the day, we may end up expressing those symptoms. That happened to me in 2011.
Oh, we did.
Before that, I was thinking like, hey, I'm working hard. Sometimes I don't have any break. The whole week, I work the whole week, the whole year. For 3 years and so on, I work hard, stress out myself, but at the end of the day, I burn out.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even think, create, and so on. I hate life and so on. And then after 2 or 3 weeks break, I rejuvenate. Again, I go to the same route, the same routine, and affect my health maybe after 3 years. I burn out, I don't think, and so on. But in 2011, it affected me very seriously that I started to reflect, started to show some of the symptoms, like my body was emaciated, I couldn't be able to sleep, I couldn't be able to eat, I was not happy and stressed out. Yes, I'm walking, yes, I was not sick and, on my bed, but I was working, still working. But I didn't know that was stress. I thought I was healthy, but I'm not sleeping well. But I see my body is emaciating. I don't know why I'm hating food. I start to hate food, and I start to, getting emaciated. And finally I started, normally I don't want to go to hospital, that's maybe bad, but what I did was I Googled these symptoms. I could be able to see that these are symptoms of stress.
Absolutely.
And that time was a very stressful time for me, because I was planning to release my first book. You can imagine your first book. You remember your first book?
Sure, I do.
The stressful, the anxiety, the happiness, the joy, at the same time the stress. And also I was planning to hold a conference for a non-profit organization that I'm the leader of, and we were planning to have our 2nd year anniversary, and I was stressed out. So it's very important for us to know these symptoms, so that because sometimes we think, hey, I'm working hard, I'm a hard-working person, I'm delivering, and so on. Without knowing, we may cross that delicate line, and we may start to see these symptoms.
Well, again, it goes back to our beliefs. As I said, one of the things I do in coaching sessions and in workshops is to help people identify their beliefs. Because again, we didn't come into this world with beliefs. We've developed them through our experiences. And as a result of that, we develop these beliefs. And they're absolutely ironclad. And one of the ways I do that is to ask people to complete this sentence. I am blank, okay? Or I must blank, And for example, if we say, I must be accomplishing something all the time. I must deliver change in this world. So that can cause us to be stressed, because we have put that demand on ourselves because of our beliefs. Nobody else did that. Nobody else made you write a book. Nobody made you head up the nonprofit organization, and nobody made you do any of that. You decided to do those things. And you not only decided to do those things, but you set a certain standard of expectation for yourself that you had to meet. And that's what triggered your burnout and your stress.
Exactly. So the goal is not to stop working or making ourselves idle.
No.
The goal is to find out a way to do whatever we're doing under our capacity. We should not overstretch ourselves.
That's exactly right.
We have to manage our time effectively so that we don't need to be stressed. So let's briefly talk about some of the physiological part of this thing, because people want to know, let's say, how stress at the end of the day leads to depression or sleep deprivation and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, also heart disease, heart attacks, blood clots. It affects asthma, diabetes, just a number of physiological changes. Asthma, people have asthma attacks because they're under a great deal of stress. As we mentioned earlier, gastrointestinal issues. So all of these are just some of the physical changes that stress brings on.
Exactly. I'm not an expert on this one, but I have read about how stress results in the release of certain hormones like cortisol,
Yes, that's
epinephrine,
That's
and
correct.
so on. And these hormones, when these hormones are released, our mind thinks that we are in danger.
That's right.
And it tries its best to survive.
That's
and
right.
there's part of that stress of
Right.
the brain to survive,
Right.
because it looks like we are under attack.
That's right.
And then the brain finds ways to survive, and some of those survival methods is to release lots of sugar, glucose,
Yeah.
and the body will be busy in
Yeah.
filtering out
That's
these
right.
things, and that process really overwhelm our organs.
Sure.
And these organs, at the end of the day, because
That's
if stress is for a while, like for a minute and it's gone, that's
Yeah.
fine. But
Yeah.
if stress stays
It's-
longer,
yeah.
it overwhelm our organs, and our organs will be affected, diseased, and therefore that's why we are experiencing those outward symptoms.
And that's what happens to people. It's not like I was stressed for 5 minutes and then I was fine. When people are stressed, it's generally day after day. Whatever it is that's going on, and that's the body's reaction to that. And so the body just breaks down under that kind of sustained effort. It's kind of like taking your car and just holding the accelerator down and just continuing to rev the engine. Eventually, it would just blow it up. So it's that kind of thing with our bodies.
Yeah, I wish if we talk about this thing for long, but
Yeah.
we have time limitations. So
Sure.
in the coming couple of minutes, I would like us to talk about the how part. How
Okay.
can we, for example, prevent stress?
Okay.
Practical things, and also how can we overcome once stress is happening?
Okay. I think the answer to both those questions is the same thing, and that is, how can we prevent stress? Number one, recognize that we're in control of the stress, not blame any external factors, blame our beliefs and our thinking on that. And once we recognize that, then we can consciously make a decision. If we're faced with a situation that could potentially lead to stress, say to ourselves, wait a minute, let me step back for a minute. What's like I did today? What's the worst thing that can happen if I don't get there at the agreed upon time? Well, I'll be a couple of minutes late. So what?
It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal.
You should not be
I'm not going to be
stressed.
taken out behind the barn
Yeah,
and
I know.
shot or something. So that's a practical way. Once we are faced with the situation, number one is to recognize that we're in control. And number two, to recognize that we can stop it at any moment and say, you know what? I'm not going down that road. I've got this project I do. If I don't get it done, I'm going to, oh my gosh, this is going to be so horrible. So, but wait a minute, what's going to happen is this, just challenge ourselves with asking questions. Why do I have to do these 15 things today? What's going to happen if I don't do them?
Exactly.
You
You
know.
can take a break, for example.
Sure.
Now, for example, myself, I try to prevent stress
That's
from
right.
happening is the moment I find myself
Yeah.
excited and a little bit stimulated,
Yeah.
I calm myself down.
And
For
you
example, I take a very brief nap
Take a
or go out and walk
Yeah.
and also put things into perspective. I say,
perspective.
hey,
Cool.
if I don't finish this thing today or this
So what?
weekend, so
I'll just-
what?
I'll
And I
carry-
when I imagine the worst thing that happens, I say, okay, that's all. Let that happen. I don't want to stress myself.
Sure.
And also drink frequently water,
Sure.
exercise, and also talk to people.
Yeah.
And I also encourage our viewers that if they are challenged by stress, they should
Sure.
not wait until they experience
Yes.
symptoms. They have
Yes.
to find coaches, mentors,
Yeah, absolutely.
share their stress, and when they share their stress, it also become insignificant, and it
Yeah.
doesn't stress their mind.
And challenge yourself. Ask yourself questions. 5 years from now, is this going to matter? Am I assuming this is the only way to look at this situation? What's another way I could look at this? Have I been in this kind of situation before? What did I learn then that can help me now? So these are all questions that we can ask ourselves to back away from whatever it is that's drawing us towards being stressed.
And also I think our partners, like our spouse, our parents, our colleagues, our friends, and also most importantly, our organizations, they should find a way to create a stress-free environment so that they may benefit the long-term performance of their employees. I enjoyed our discussion. Thank you very much on behalf of ISAT and our viewers. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dear our viewers, this is my hope that you enjoyed our discussion. If you have been stressed out, well, from now onward, that should change. If you have been okay, now from now onward, pay closer attention. Don't allow stress to rob your happiness, contentment, and your joy. Help your friends, your colleagues, your employees also to live a stress-free life. Thank you very much for watching. Looking forward to have another chance with you.